Hi there, Emily Midgett here with you today on the Pink Fresh Studio YouTube channel, and I have some holiday inspiration that I'm going to create by using a stamp set that's not normally meant for holiday crafting, but we're going to chop it up and we're going to make this lovely holiday house. So we're going to start with the Botanicals and Branches stamp set. We're going to leave off the butterflies to make it a little bit more seasonally appropriate. And then we're going to use the Built on Dreams, just the die, the house die, and we're going to pair that with the hexagon tile die to give it a little bit of texture. We're going to use one of the elements from the Holiday Elements stamp set, and then the Brushed Sentiments Holiday Hot Foil plate, the dies, and then we're going to pair that with the solid plate so we have that reverse foiling look. So we're going to start by heat embossing the branch from Botanicals and Branches. And we're just going, we took off all the butterflies, which is a lovely feature of that stamp set. You can use it either with the butterflies or without. They are removable. We're going to heat emboss that onto some Fabriano Artistico watercolor paper using some platinum embossing powder, which pairs nicely with the foiled sentiment that we're going to use. So I'm just heating up that embossing powder right now. And I've taped it down to my watercolor board, and I am going to use, these are Schminky watercolors, and I'm just going to do some very basic watercoloring. We're going to allow that technique, that blooming technique that I used in my video from last month, to kind of help us do some loose, just some really simple watercoloring. These are very small images on this Botanicals and Branches stamp set, so there isn't a ton of room for you to really get down into the nooks and crannies and do a ton of shading, but we're going to do some basic shading. I'm first using a very bright lime green watercolor for my base layer of the leaves, and I'm just laying down some color at the base of the leaf, cleaning my brush, dabbing it on my stamp chamois, and kind of pulling that color out with my clean brush to get kind of a concentration of color towards where the leaf connects to the branch, and then pulling it out and fading it out towards the end of the leaf. So now I have completed that for all of my leaves, and I'm just going to use a darker green to add a little bit more shadow and a little bit more typically holiday color of green, a holiday shade of green. And so I am adding that color with my damp paintbrush, and then I clean my brush. I always make sure to have plenty of clean water and my stamp chamois when I'm watercoloring, because when I add that concentrated color on my watercolor paper, I immediately clean my brush with clean water and dab it on my stamp chamois so that I can maneuver that color with my damp paintbrush. If you add too much color and too much water to your watercolored image, you're not going to be able to maneuver that color very much. You're going to get it's going to spread, and it's just going to be kind of flat color. So what we want is the addition of some curvature to our leaves. So I do that by adding that concentrated color wherever I want the shadows to be darkest, cleaning my paintbrush, dabbing it on my stamp chamois, and then pulling the color out with that damp paintbrush to give it that shape that we're after, to give it the shape and the shadow and a little bit of dimension. Like I said, these leaves are not very big, so we don't have a ton of area to work with, but we are able to get a little bit of depth and dimension on these leaves. So now I have switched over to our Christmassy red shade of watercolor. There are some tiny little flowers on this Botanicals and Branches stamp set, and I thought that they would be a perfect substitute for some Christmas berries. I love pairing flowers with berries to create that kind of festive holiday feel. So I am this is again very basic watercoloring. These are very small images, so there really isn't any room to make them very intricate or super shadowed and detailed. So we're just basic adding some color to the berries themselves, the quote-unquote berries. They're not really berries. So now we're adding some brown to this center, the twig that these branches and berries are hanging off from, growing off from, and just some very basic brown watercolor in the center, not worrying again about too much shading. And once we have that finished, we're going to die cut this with the coordinating die. Now that does die cut the butterflies as well, but it's not, we can just toss those aside because we're not going to use those today. So now I have also heat embossed a poinsettia, the small poinsettia with some leaves from the Holiday Elements stamp set. This is a new stamp set that was released for the holiday release for this year from Pink Fresh. And I have heat embossed, I just inked up one small section of that stamp because it is intended to go with the washi tape. It is intended to go with the entire suite. I just inked up one section of that stamp, and I'm going to fussy cut it out instead of die cutting the whole thing. But that stamp set and die set and the whole suite works flawlessly together if you want to pair all of those elements together. But we're just doing some watercoloring on that poinsettia today. And I'm putting the concentrated color towards the center of my flower, and then I'm cleaning my brush, dabbing it on my stamp chamois, and pulling that color out. Again, this is a very small image. It's a little bit larger than the leaves and berries that we worked with before, so there is a little bit, and there's a little bit of more interest in that there are petals that are kind of stacked on top of each other. There are petals tucked behind, so it's easier to get a little bit more dimension and depth with these. So I am adding one layer of red and pulling that out and getting a little bit of dimension and a little bit of shape, and then I'm going back in and I'm adding a little bit of maroon just to add a touch of shadow. But again, there's not a lot of room to work here, so this is a great, these smaller images are great for practicing your watercoloring because there's not a ton of area that you have to cover, that you have to worry about getting too intense with the details. So again, here I am just adding a little bit of that maroon, that dark maroon, over the top of our bright red poinsettia. And I did add some more of that lime green base to our foliage, to our poinsettia leaves. And I'm going to go back in with that, again, that dark green, and we're going to add a little bit more intensity to that color. But that base layer of lime green, it just helps to add a bit of brightness to our green leaves. It helps to that, because the watercolor is transparent, it shines through. That base layer of that bright, intense lime green shines through really nicely. Well, there we have our finished poinsettia flower, and it pairs nicely because we use the same colors for both the foliage on the branches and the foliage in the poinsettia, and we use the same shades of red, so it all flows nicely together. They're similarly drawn. The detail is similar in both of them, so they pair, even though they're not from the same stamp set, they pair beautifully together. So now it's time to create our card base. I thought it would be fun to do a shaped card base for this one, so I am using the Built on Dreams house die, just the die from that set, to create a shaped card front. I have cut it from some maroon cardstock, and then I ran it through my die cut machine with the hexagon tile die to create some really nice subtle texture in the background. And then I am going to create a shaped card base, and I have created just an A2 card with a side fold, and I am going to run my Built on Dreams house die through my die cut machine, as making sure that the top of the house die overlaps the seam of the fold of my card base. So now when I take that out, it's a complete card base. It's one piece, and I can add my full maroon card front over the top, and it still opens beautifully, and it will stand up really nicely like on a mantelpiece or something. So now I am taking some scissors and I'm just snipping off all of the little bits of foliage from our watercolored botanical and branches watercolored die cut. And I am going to use those little pieces of foliage to arrange our holiday bouquet on the front of our Christmas house. I thought this would be a really cute card to create also with like maybe a home for the holidays sentiment or something like that. So I'm just using some really strong adhesive to add our textured card front, and you can see that it opens really easily and it will stand up really nicely. So I'm adding our Brushed Sentiments Holiday Hot Foiled Sentiment with some foam adhesive. And I am just going to add the rest of our watercolored elements with some more foam tape. I do use a double layer of foam tape for the poinsettia. Then I use single layers of foam tape and liquid adhesive on some of the other foliage pieces, so that there's lots of height, lots of different levels of dimension on this card front. It just adds a little bit of extra interest when you have those multiple levels of height. So I do kind of create kind of a almost climbing effect up the side of the house die, and it kind of covers up. There's supposed to be a coordinating stamp set that goes with that little cluster up at the top of the chimney, and we just cover that up with some of these bits of foliage. And now it's time to add some leaf glitter drops. These are some brand new leaf glitter drops from the latest Essentials release that was kind of, I think it was snuck in at the end of September. And they're just a really pretty kind of a soft, minty sage green. And I'm just adding them with some liquid adhesive. And then that is the end of this card. It was such a simple watercoloring, just adds such a beautiful effect for this Christmas card. This would be such a pretty card standing up on a mantelpiece or on, you know, on a Christmas table or something like that. It would be so pretty, and it stands up so nicely. So thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you'll give this technique a try, and if you liked this video, maybe hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button so you can get more content from us in the future. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.